So a hot conversation topic in today's real estate community is the potential emergence of the next foreclosure crisis due to COVID-19. And people are comparing the last housing crash that occurred in 2008 to 2009 to today's situation. And while the two periods have similarities, like a high unemployment rate as well as an economy that's on a decline, there are distinct differences. Now, I'm going to go over these differences in depth, and I'm going to show you why now is not the time to be rubbing your hands together waiting for foreclosures to flood the market. Now, let's kick things off by doing a comparison between the last recession and today. So in 2008, banks were the problem. There was a debt crisis. A majority of lenders were offering loans to real estate investors, commercial real estate investors, as well as residential buyers, and were backed by Wall Street securities. For a lot of different reasons, there were misaligned incentives to write off as many loans as possible, even if they were bad loans, with the hopes of building them up later, selling off the portfolio. To expedite the underwriting on these loans, some reduced the standards to the point where allegations were accepted and documents were not necessary for the loan to be approved. These loans were called non-doc loans. Now, eventually, the bad loans became toxic and they overwhelmed the entire portfolio of loans. And as the crisis deepened, the real estate market crumbled under the weight of these bad loans. They created bad debt with toxic loans, which froze the bank's liquidity when the loans couldn't be resold. Now, the aggressive non-doc underwriting, it left very little recourse for the banks, except to start the foreclosure process since they needed that liquidity. This in turn caused a crash in the real estate prices. And it became a very vicious circle because as the prices came down, the properties went underwater or negative in equity, incentivizing borrowers to default, which then caused even more foreclosures. Eventually, the banks offered loan modifications, but it was too late. The damage was already done. So today, we're experiencing an income crisis. There's an enormous disparity of income from so many people losing their job all at once. And while this could be a recession, it isn't a foregone conclusion. And as banks were part of the problem back then, today, banks are part of the solution. The stress test that banks have been subject to since the last crash has left them in a much stronger financial situation. The major banks have suspended share buybacks to maximize their liquidity, and the result is that banks have been preemptively working with property owners since early March by providing workouts on existing loans that include forbearance, deferments, and even other deals that allow owner to skip payment until a later time. Now, this might mean that the payments get moved either to the back of the loan, a short period after everything reopens, or really anything in between. This might cause a hardship later on, but it does alleviate the negative effects on the current income crisis now. So it's important to note that the banks are able to work with homeowners because of their own increased liquidity and because the underwriting used for today's loans are a lot more conservative than back then. There is more incentive for the bank to pause a temporary bad situation on a good loan than to start the foreclosure process. Now, the signal that the banks are sending with the workouts is clear. They're saying now is not then. Another immediate benefit of the increased liquidity is the increasing refinances that are taking place. Now, rates are at historic lows, allowing for property owners to save money by refinancing their current loans. And while you may not be able to pull out as much money as you plan to due to the stricter lending guidelines, these restrictions will be offset by the gains of a lower rate. And the net effect is that the borrower is lowering his or her risk of foreclosure. And beyond all this, many foreclosures still in the system are stuck. Most courts closed for evictions and foreclosures because of the coronavirus pandemic. And then this is resulting in no new supply hitting the market and cases that were already started just sitting in the pipeline going nowhere. However, foreclosures have started again in some places and will follow suit maybe at the end of 2021 when we start seeing some of these deals hit the market. Hey guys, we unpacked a whole lot of information on today's episode. If you learned something of value, show us some love by hitting that like button. If you have any questions regarding the real estate market as a whole, feel free and reach out. I'm Mario Albañez, and as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on next week's show.